So I would like to welcome everybody. I'm Daniel Ziblatt. I'm the Interim Director of the Center for European Studies here at Harvard. I'm also a Professor of Government. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you here and our guest of honor this afternoon as well. We've had a long history at our center of inviting leading statesmen and leading stateswomen of Europe to give talks and to visit Harvard, and today is one of these days where we have a leading statesman visiting us. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Guido Westerwelle here. Dr. Guido Westerwelle is the German Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs from October 2009 to December 2013. In December 2013, upon leaving office just several months ago, he did something that's very common in the United States and the UK for politicians, but not very common or perhaps totally unprecedented in Germany. He started his own foundation, the Westerwelle Foundation for, let's get the title here, International Understanding.
Perfect.
It's an important new foundation based in Berlin. So Dr. Westerwelle was born in 1961. He grew up in Bonn. We also received a doctorate of law at the University of Bonn. He joined the Free Democratic Party in 1980, was Secretary General of the party from 1994 to 2001. Between 2001 and 2011, he was chairman of the party and served as a member of the Bundestag throughout this period. From 2006 to 2009, he was the president of the FDP parliamentary group and leader of the opposition. And beginning in 2009, as I said, he was Minister of Foreign Affairs. And also between 2009 and 2011, he was Deputy Chancellor of the Federal Republic. So in short, as you see, Dr. Westerwelle has been in the center of action of international and German political life for the last 20 years. And so we're absolutely pleased to have you here, and we look forward to your comments.
Thank you. Well, first of all, dear Daniel Ziblatt, thank you so much for the invitation and very warm welcome to the students and ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted that you could make it possible, I've heard, to come here at the first spring day after a hard winter in Boston and Cambridge. Sorry?
Schleswig.
Yeah, Schleswig, genau. And so it's very nice that you could make it possible. And I'm grateful for the discussions I already had this morning. We had a wonderful breakfast with young students and could discuss it a bit off the record. Now I will be more disciplined for those who joined me this morning, because it's tapped and taped, where we are in the center of some foreign policy issues. I'm really glad to be here back again. I think you were so kind to tell a bit about my personal CV. If I remember correctly, I have been here in Harvard for the first time, visiting some friends who studied in Harvard. It was in the last millennium, so you can imagine it was a long time ago, and it's really good to be back again. And once again, it's a great honor that I have the honor to speak a bit. Our proposal is that I will start with some thoughts, and that we probably after it have the opportunity, and will use the opportunity to discuss with each other. So feel free to ask questions. There's no limitation. You can ask whatever you want, but I think it's better that we limit the first introduction part in this afternoon lecture, and then probably we have the possibility and focus this afternoon to the discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason why I just want to touch some issues, and I will start with an analysis of what we see at the moment in the world, and what was really a characteristic of my last 4 years being Foreign Minister of our Federal Republic in Germany. I think the effects of globalization, they are confronting us with profound changes and demanding new challenges. And globalization, for the most young people, is something which you take as granted. It's something you live in. This is a new word, a relatively new word. It's not a new phenomenon, but it's a relatively new word. For example, when I wrote my first book in the middle of the 90s, I remember that we had in Germany the discussion, is it a globalization or it is a globalism, which is a big difference. A real process or an ideology, which is of course a big difference, which you can accept or not. But a real process is something you have to manage it. So there is no hidden agenda behind it, as some people think, and it's not a new phenomenon that we have globalization in the world. Since we have communities, since we had the first civilizations, it was clear that mutual trade brings benefit to those who trade with each other, mutual benefit for all the sides. But there's one big difference when you look back. This is the big difference of the days in which we live. We should call the globalization more or less a high-speed globalization. So the new factor in our life is not global trade, is not global competition. It is the time. It is the speed. It is the high speed which changes the world. The younger people here in this room, they may not think about a distance of another 30 years. But if you come into my age and look back, of course, I was at the end of I think I was a young lawyer when the wall fell in Berlin, and we had the reunification 89, 90, 91. And those who are in my age, they know that these last 20, 25, 30 years were nothing like this. So when I'm talking a bit later about the year 2030, 40, and 50, for the younger people it sounds far away, but for us in my age, early and the middle of the 50s, it's completely different. It is really something what we have to face, where we have to be prepared for these new days, and this is what we have to accept as Europe, as Germans, as, may I say so, as the large Western countries, or our Western community of values. So let us prepare ourselves early enough. And the first thing which I think is necessary to accept is that we see the rise of new power countries that a decade or two ago were part of what we used to call the third world. So the development countries of my youth, when I studied, when I went to the nearly best university in the world, Bonn, close to Harvard, when I went to my university, these countries of my youth, these developing countries of my youth, these were exactly the same countries where I had to negotiate with on the same eye level in the last 4 years. Which means in G20, the majority of these countries were developing countries if you look 20 or 30 years ago, back. So I think it's obvious that the world changed, and that these new centers of power will change not only the economic situation in the world, it will completely change the political and, in brackets, it's not my issue today, my topic today, also the cultural life in the world and the academic life. I will come back to this point a bit later. So globalization makes the world hardly comprehensible and understandable, but it is getting more complicated to understand what is happening and why. Which means we learn everything, what's going on every spot in the world. If this tragedy happens that a young man in Tunisia burns himself, and we see the start of the Yasmin revolution, and we see the protesters on the Boulevard Bourguiba, then it is something we are there in real time. So we are part of this story, which does not mean that we understand everything what we see. Who is able to really analyze the Chinese leadership? We know everything in our cultural hemisphere, in our Western countries. We know everything about a scandal of a half-naked senator who chatted with some ladies via internet. But we do know nothing about the leadership, for example, in probably one of the most important powers in the world, in China. Of course, we know President Xi, we know Prime Minister Li, and the former generations, of course, who were in power. But we are still fixed on our in Europe, on our Eurocentric perspective in the Western world, to what's going on in our capitals, in our societies, and we think this is the world. So we should start to see the world not only through our own traditional glasses, we have to start to see the world through the glasses of these emerging powers, these emerging countries. And if you look to Ukraine, for example, to Crimea, it is a different perspective. If you live in Washington, or for example, if you live in Warsaw, or if you live in Romania, or if you look to Myanmar, what's going on there, what President Sen did together with this wonderful lady Aung San Suu Kyi, I think it's interesting to see and to understand that if you live in Thailand and if you live, for example, in China, you have a different feeling and a different opinion to this. It's the same with Afghanistan. It is a complete difference for all of us. Where you live and where you work and what daily news you get. I think this makes a big difference. And I just want to encourage us to put more often on the glasses of these emerging powers and these new centers of powers, like I called them a few years ago. So we are witnessing a new powers in the international politics, and we are witnessing a huge demographic change, and we are witnessing a new digital age, which means there are three new challenges in our days, in our time, and the time we live. It is, first of all, the demographic change. This will completely change the world. We have the digital revolution, and which is not part of my discussion this afternoon, or not part of my lecture this afternoon. Of course, we have the energy issue, which is also determined to change the world more than we think today, and also the global balance more than we think today. So, ladies and gentlemen, anyone who believes they handle it on their own is just harking back for a bygone age. In Europe, you know that we have lots of discussions about the currency situation, the debt crisis, and we have controversies, no doubt about it. You know this, I do not have to hide this. There are some who think it is the austerity policy which is the cause for the drama. Others, like we think that the debt, the deficit spending is the reason for it. Probably we find other causes and other reasons, but that's only one part of the discussion. I think this is doable, and Europe, for the first time since many years, sees a silver line at the horizon. I think with some luck, we are able to overcome and to manage this debt and financial crisis and economic crisis in Europe. Unfortunately, I think we are facing a serious political crisis. So it may be that we will have the worst of the financial crisis behind us, but the worst of the political crisis is in front of us. It has a lot to do with the results of the expected results of the elections in May. We will see that nationalism is for some the simple answer on what they saw in the last few years and their personal suffering. And we shouldn't underestimate what it means for a young lady or a young man in Greece or in Spain or in Portugal to come through and to survive in such a struggle. This is not an easy thing. And I think, therefore, it was right that Europe showed solidarity in a remarkable way. But we have to understand that this is the changing world is the real explanation for the necessity of a deeper integration of the European Union. We will not be able to defend our values, to defend our goods, including, for example, our intellectual properties, if we think we can do it by our own. We need others. We need partners. We need the old partners. This is one of the reasons why I am a strongly supporter of TTIP. And we need also new strategic partners in the world. Both is absolutely necessary. And if you find a new friend, it does not mean that you give up your old friends. Or Hillary Clinton, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, I think she said, expressed it in a wonderful way from the Washington perspective. She said the pivot to Asia is not a pivot away from Europe. And I think this is the way how we should handle it. We will see if this works on the ground. It's complicated enough with the background of some turbulences, NSA and other things, surveillance scandal. You know that this is not an easy thing for us at home. But it is the necessity why we need our better integration in the Western world and especially in Europe. There is one good example. I had a little bon mot which I learned by my former colleague from Luxembourg. The Luxembourg foreign minister, he told me one day that he has been in a press conference in China. And he stood there next to the Chinese foreign minister. And then he said to the Chinese foreign minister, "Excellency, Mr. Minister, you and me together, we are now representing 1/4 of the population of the world." And I think we should think about it. It needs a second thought. And then you understand that I'm not talking about Luxembourg. Like it or not. I'm not talking about Luxembourg. I'm also talking about the leading economy in Europe, Germany, or France, or Great Britain. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely necessary. What we have to understand that we will only survive with our values, we only will succeed with our values in this changing world when we find partners and when we are strong enough to resist against this nationalism in times of globalization. Nationalization in times of globalization is a contradiction in itself. It cannot work. And I'm 100% convinced that this is the justification, if it needs one, in our days for a stronger and a deeper integration policy on our European continent, in the European Union, which brings up dozens of new problems, but it's better to manage these problems than to accept that we are more and more shifting out of the center of the world, as economies, as societies, as democracies. And to clarify this, I would like to give you just a few figures. Up to the year 2050, and once again, addressing to the young people here in this room, 2050 is not so far away like you think. If you are 20 years now, 2050 is roundabout when you will reach my age, which is extremely young from my point of view. So just understand this. This is the time what I'm talking about. It's your time what I'm talking about, and not the time of the next 10 generations. Even if you feel that way, you can't believe that there's life after your 30th birthday. But there is life, even after your 50th birthday. And it's nuts. Especially when you're a free man. Up to the year 2000, or a free woman, of course. Up to the year 2050, our world will have 9.6 billion inhabitants. India alone will soon have 3 times the population of the whole European Union put together. In contrast, Germany's share of the world population will dip below 1% in just a few years' time. Within Europe, Germany may seem like a pretty big player, but it's the world. What we have to understand is changing. In the world as a whole, we are fairly small on our own. The same is true for the United Kingdom, France and Finland, and, I'm sorry to say so as a guest, even for the United States of America. Among the 31 countries with the highest birth rate are 29 African countries. By 2050, the African population will reach 2.4 billion, more than twice as much as today. At the turn of the century, there will even be 4.2 billion inhabitants, more than 4 times as much as today. The same in Asia. Almost 4.3 billion people live in Asia. The number is continually increasing. In the same year, it is predicted Europe's population will only make up 7.6% of the world's population. And although the US population is growing, its percentage by 2050 will be 4.3%. Like it or not, but this is reality. This is what you can forecast today. And you can do a lot, but the frame of these numbers you cannot change if nothing happens which is totally unexpected and a catastrophe to the whole world, of course. But I think we have to understand that this is the new world with which we have to deal. Or take the number of internet accesses in Africa. In the year 2000, there were 4.5 million internet users, and in 2012, there were more than 167 million users. This is a growth of more than 3,600%. The number of mobile phones increased from 60 million in 2000 to 650 million in 2012. I'm talking about Africa, one of the most underestimated, together with Latin America, the 2 most underestimated continents from my point of view in the public discussions. In Asia, more than 1.1 billion have internet access. On no other continent there are more. And as I'm speaking here at the university, let me focus on the major topic of the future, which is, of course, like we all know in times of globalization, education. There is a huge and growing crowd of highly qualified university graduates. Take China, for example. Today, there are 5 times as many university students as there were 10 years ago. The amount of universities has doubled. By 2020, nearly 20% of the Chinese population will be university graduates. That equals the total amount of young Americans by 2020. And speaking here at a university which is rightly called as one of the leading and elite universities in the world, do we really think that then, in these days, all the elite universities we have in the Western world will have no competition from Asia or from China? We get new elite universities. And it's a question of time and of power and of financial engagement. And it's possible. We will see that not only Chinese students are coming to Harvard, we will see that also students more and more, it already happens, from the States, from the United States, from the European Union, from where else, they will go to China and study there, to understand their culture, to get the best education. It will become a part of the education of the elites to go to Asia and to go to China. And this is, I think, really decisive. It is a world in which the global balance of power is shifting dramatically, in which the political and economic influence must be recompiled. For Germany, Europe, and the United States, this means that they must cultivate old friendships, like I mentioned before, even more intensively than today, and it must actively explore new partnerships. So what we have to do is we have to create a win-win situation. It must not be our own intention to protect our piece of the pie, but to improve the recipe with the new ingredients to create a greater share for everyone. This is why we need, for example, more economic exchange, and this is why I fully support the TTIP. I can only encourage the leaders on both sides on the Atlantic Sea not to give up. It's true that the surveillance scandal damaged our relations. I'm out of office, so I'm able to speak very free and very frank about this. This is not acceptable. I have to say that tapping or taping the Chancellor's C phone has nothing to do with fighting against terrorists. I know Angela Merkel since 20 years. I had never the impression that she's talking too much on phone with terrorists. So I think this is really a stupid excuse, what we read about this. We cannot accept this. But even this controversy we have to overcome, because it is necessary to understand that we have to build a new, reliable and sustainable bridge, and two pillars, one in Europe and one in the United States of America, is necessary, therefore, if we want to be successful. If we want our values, our interests to be heard in the world of tomorrow, we need a strong European transatlantic partnership. It's not about who is better or stronger in Europe. It is not about competition between European member states to balance and trade surpluses or deficits with the European Union. The main question is not competition in the Western world. The main question, the decisive, crucial question, is competition with other regions in the world. And I think this is something what we have to understand, and we have, of course, to correct and to implement, therefore, a new policy. And this means, for example, we have to change the international institutions. The international institutions, the architecture, the political architecture, what we have on the international stage at the moment, is more or less an echo of the time after Second World War. But it's not reflecting, it's not mirroring the world like it is today. I mentioned two continents and said these are really underestimated continents. I'm deeply convinced that Africa has a lot of problems, we know this. Really a lot of poverty, I'm sorry, and many, many problems, of course. But we have to understand that there's also an Africa of opportunities. And if you look for some countries, it's interesting how successful they are, and that they are really starting a new economic development, which also brings up new questions for the international politicians. I mean, I have been for 2 years, I had the honor for 2 years to represent, together with my colleagues in the Foreign Office and in the German government, Germany as a non-permanent member in the Security Council. And for those who are not so familiar with this, you know that if you are a member in the Security Council, elected member in the Security Council, there's a rotating chair, which means if you are there in 2 years, more or less, you have the chair for, you are president of the Security Council for 1 month, and then next year for another month, roundabout. And I can only tell you the fact that Latin America, the whole continent Latin America, is not represented permanently in the Security Council with one single vote, is the world like it used to be, but not the world in which we are living, and not the future world. If we look to Africa, the fact that Africa is not represented permanently in the Security Council with one single vote, is an echo of history and the time after Second World War and our darkest chapter in German history. But it is not the world in which we are living today. And the fact that, for example, Asia is only represented with one permanent voice, with one permanent membership in the Security Council, with the vote of China, I think is also not reflecting the balance in the world. like it is today and like it will be. It is the world like it used to be. And if we will just think about China and Japan, India and Japan and others, so we see the first impression that this does not work, and the more the international policy, the more the international institutions ignore the realities in the world, the less their decisions are respected in important regions of our world, in other regions and in other countries and in other peoples, of course. I think this is something what we have to understand. It makes a big difference if you are an African leader when it comes to military interventions, or if you are someone who sits in Europe or in Washington. It's a big difference. And like it or not, when you talk to the Sahel countries, for example, you get your own answers when it comes to military interventions. And I think it is necessary to understand that all these countries have to be respected in a fair, balanced way, which means the reform of the institutions in the United Nations are really urgent if we will not lose in our international policy architecture, which we need more and not less, from my point of view, especially the United Nations. Today, ladies and gentlemen, there are 46 ongoing active wars and armed conflicts in the world, many in Africa and in Asia. And speaking as a German, I know the importance of history and what we have to learn from the past if we do not want to make the same mistakes and their horrible consequences generations did before us. With the history of Germany, our role cannot be an inactive role, but at the same time, it cannot be a military role. Being reserved regarding military actions is not a lack of responsibility. It is, to the contrary, a manifestation of responsibility towards mankind. We do not live in a peaceful world, hence it must be our greatest concern to find diplomatic solutions for ongoing conflicts and avoid military actions ahead of time. Given that Germany has no hidden agenda on the international stage, and with its experience from history, my country could and should play a leading role in insisting on diplomacy, initiating negotiations, and finding peaceful solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned before the concept of the so-called enlarged West. In a world with new centers, a power agreement between the US and the EU will no longer be sufficient to shape global solutions, but we can and we should be a motor of progress. We have to engage with new powers, bring on board new partners in order to build a broader consensus in a world where the idea of freedom continues to gain strength. It is imperative that the West, the cradle of freedom, stands together, or let it express it in that way: we are all children of the Enlightenment. And this is what brings us together. This is what we have in common. We are children of the Enlightenment. We believe in individual rights. And that's a big difference to many, many other countries and political systems all over the world. And I think at the end of the day and of many discussions we had, this is what counts. It is not business where you can build on policy. It is important that you have something in common, which is more than up and down of business opportunities. It is, from my point of view, it's the value policy, the community of values, which brings us together and which clarifies that we really sit in the same boat. If we lose our trust, we will lose our partnership. If we lose our partnership, we will lose the power to shape the world. So let me finish with one personal conclusion. Daniel, you were so kind to tell this wonderful audience a bit about my new idea, or my latest project, the founding of the foundation. We think that this has a wonderful tradition in the United States or in Great Britain and in Anglo-Saxonia countries all over the world. In Germany, it's the first time that a former foreign minister founded his foundation for international understanding. The idea is that I think, together with my partner in this foundation, the co-founder in this foundation, Ralf Dommermuth, it is necessary to use this international network, not only to capitalize it, but also to use it for international understanding and to promote the values of rule of law, of democracy, of free economy, and of tolerance. This is the idea. And in this frame, we think it is necessary that we promote economy. Without economic and social participation, democracy has no chance. Without economic and social participation, you cannot get a stable democracy or a stable society, which does not mean that successful economies always brings democracy. But without a successful economy, without improvement of the life of the normal people, it's a mission impossible to create and to erect a democratic system. And this is the lesson we should learn in the so-called, after the so-called Arab Spring. I prefer the word Arab seasons, because it's really much more complicated. And I have to say, in this frame, for us, we want to promote the idea of the German Mittelstand, the idea of what we call the backbone of our economy. For us, it is not only a role model for a successful economy, and it's proven in Germany that this is really a success story with all modesty. It is also a concept, it's also a role model for a stable society. It's more than middle class. Mittelstand is something you cannot translate in English. It's like kindergarten, or Energiewende, or Waldsterben. It is unique. But we think that this support of SMEs, smaller and medium-sized enterprises, can really help in this emerging and upcoming new countries to bring democracy, or to stabilize democracy and our democratic values. And I would be delighted and honored if you look into this. It's just what you said, a very new foundation. It's a startup, and I'm very much interested in your thoughts, in your proposals, in your ideas for projects, and I'm looking forward for many other meetings. Thank you so much for your attention.
So thank you very much. You've given us certainly a lot to think about, and we have some time now to open it up for questions. I thought, so what I'll do is people can raise their hands and I'll call on people, but I thought what I would do is begin the discussion, take my position as chair to ask one question. In your account of current developments in the world, it seemed as if there was two different dynamics that are changing. One are these economic forces of change that you began your talk with, and the second are the shift as result, and in some ways connected to that first change, changing balance of power among countries. And so to bring this to a very concrete case, I mean, when we look at how the world has reacted to the Russian situation with Ukraine.
You mean the Western world, to be precisely?
Well, but I guess this is part of the issue, and how the world has responded to it, how the world has thought about it. it seems as if there's two possible interpretations. One, we can blame this kind of what's happened on actions by the Russian regime. Or second, is this in some ways a result of some dysfunction in the international system, some failure on the part, let's say, of European powers as well as the US in responding and sending the right signals, some breakdown that's a result of these changing dynamics. So I guess the question is, what do you think are the major differences between the way Germany and the EU more generally and the US have dealt with this and thought about this? Do you think that some differences among the world's powers has led to this?
That's not an easy question for me because I left my office only 3 months ago, and it wouldn't be very polite to make concrete or too many comments to the last few weeks. So it's a bit complicated for me and delicate for me to answer this very, very important question. So I'm not here to criticize leaders in Europe or where else. I think we all know that this Russian policy is not acceptable in Crimea, but I have to say I propose a wise and a smart reaction. Because if this becomes a domestic issue, if this becomes a controversy between parties, domestic controversy between parties and politicians, then I think we are far away from a sustainable and peaceful solution. That's why I think it's important to understand security in Europe without Russia is a mission impossible. And every agreement which we will find has to bring Russia on board. And I think some of you know exactly what I mean. This is a public speech, so I'm very cautious and a bit reluctant about this answer. But I think it is necessary to understand that it does not make sense just to mirror the mood of the old public opinion by tough wordings. It is important that we use our diplomatic channels instead of cutting them on all levels. I think this is the lesson I learned. I know that I was criticized many times as someone who is too friendly and too nice because I was always seeking for peaceful solutions in such situations, but I think it's the only way how it will work. I'm very concerned about this, and I think it's necessary to understand the best would be to negotiate and to go a bit into the direction Henry Kissinger published a few days ago. We have to find an agreement, and like it or not. But Russia will stay our European neighbor. That's for sure. And this is why we have to understand how important it is to bring them on board. And this is what, from my point of view, is necessary. And I welcome every action of politicians who want to use the exchange instead of cutting them. We have formats for discussions. For example, the NATO-Russian Council. this is exactly the moment for such a format, from my point of view. And there we shouldn't repeat the mistake after the Georgian intervention, which was also unacceptable, that we cut these channels instead of using them. And once again, probably you believe me that I'm not defending what President Putin does. I'm absolutely concerned about the situation, not only on Crimea. And as someone, I mentioned this morning, I got a similar question. As someone who lives together with a man and who's married with a man, you can imagine that I could have many comments to the situation in Russia, but it is necessary to understand without diplomacy and without negotiations we cannot overcome this crisis.
So I will call on people, and if I could just ask you to identify yourself. So I'll begin here with Thomas. Excuse me. People, yeah, keep your
Thomas, I'm a visiting scholar. I have two quick questions. So first one is about, is this actually on?
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, okay. About the use of hard power, and I guess it actually expands a bit on the previous question. Could I just encourage you to talk a little bit about where you think the future of hard power in the world,
Of hard power.
of hard power, and also of Germany's role in this respect is, and if you could maybe reflect a little bit about how similar or how different your view is from that laid out by the German president at the Munich Security Conference in January. The second one is about Mittelstand and civil society democratization. My question is maybe slightly unfair, but I'll ask it anyway. I mean, you said that you believe in that this will foster civil society democratization, and that they are well learned from the German context there. But you mentioned German history yourself. Of course, Mittelstand was historically also compatible in Germany with very different political regimes that were anything but democratic. So what makes you believe that by fostering Mittelstand, you are actually fostering democracy?
Thank you. First, please allow me, I do not make any comments to the President of the Federal Republic of Germany. Once again, I'm just out of office since 3 months, so this is nothing I would like to do. I just want to say one simple sentence to whom it may concern. Sending more German soldiers into more wars is not an expression of responsible foreign policy. I think that's clear now. About Mittelstand, it has many reasons why I believe that this is the precondition for a stable society. First, middle class and Mittelstand creates normally education. First thing what people do if they do not have to fight every day for water and bread, that they try to educate their children and the next generation. And democracy and education are twins. It's really necessary that in democratic countries, education is a key issue for us. Secondly, I would like to say, if a society has only very rich and very poor people, if there is a huge canyon in the society, instead of a stable bridge between poor and rich, then I think it's risky for the democratic developments. So the majority of a country should belong to the Mittelstand and middle class. And then I think, third, it is the lesson we learned in the revolutions in the countries south of the Mediterranean Sea. When I look back, I think there was one big mistake we all worldwide are responsible for. When the whole revolution, when the revolutions started there, we all should have opened our markets for them and their products. I have been there so many times, before and after I became foreign minister. The people I met on Tahrir, few days after Mubarak stepped down, the people, many of them asked for political participation. The majority asked for social and for economic participation. They asked for a better life for their families. This is the main reason why the revolution started, and this is one of the main reasons why it was in some countries not as successful as we would wish. The tourists didn't go there any longer, which is very understandable. So if you read every day something in the papers, then of course you do not send your wife or your children to a vacation into some of these countries. That's normal. But the investments also were frozen, and this brought an extra problem to these countries. And for example, when you go to Egypt, we normally are focused to the situation in Cairo and 2 or 3 other bigger cities, but that's not Egypt. That's a part of Egypt. Cairo is the cultural center of the whole region, but it's not Egypt. And we have to understand if the people after a democratic revolution started are in a decreased personal situation, then I think it cannot work. These are the 3 reasons and many others why I think it works. And of course, I could add 4 and 5, for example, responsibility and economic opportunity. The responsibility and the opportunity are 2 sides of the same coin in the Mittelstand. Because there's a personal liability for those who are leading these Mittelstand companies. This is not only an economic question, this is a social question. This is a question for the whole society, and many other reasons.
I'm Bernd Willig from MIT. My question is also about the Mittelstand. It's interesting that we talk about the Mittelstand here so much, which is, as you rightly point out, it's about a whole ecosystem of values, of engagements with society. My question to you is, what do universities and systems of higher education should do to foster innovation, entrepreneurship? I mean, this is, in a sense, at the core of small and medium-sized enterprises. Do we need to change educational system? How can we make sure that universities kind of a part of this ecosystem?
That's an excellent question, but I would like to answer it in a different way, like you probably expected. I do not want to make remarks to the academic life, because this is not the key question, or this is not the core of the Mittelstand. It's the dual system. It's vocational training. I mean, we are sitting here in a room where we think, of course, the academic life at the center of the world. And everyone should read every morning the New York Times or the Spiegel. But that's not reality. I went to I have a different career, education career than others probably, and this is probably why I'm so focused on this question beyond the academic life. I went to what we call in Germany first Realschule. It's a complicated system in Germany. We have 3 types of schools: Hauptschule, Realschule, and Gymnasium. And the Gymnasium prepares you for the academic life, for university, for example. The Hauptschule and the Realschule prepares you for a job, which means you start to work, I don't know, as someone in a bank or in a manufacturing company, something like this. I learned with this personal background that probably 70–80% of the young people have different thoughts about their life than visiting another 5 years university. Big majority, they want to have a good education, where I think the dual system is really extremely successful, and that's, I think, the best what we can do to educate and to qualify young people. The conference with my foundation, which we are preparing later this year, is a conference also not about not only about the headline of our foundation, but also about one specific aspect: how can we overcome youth unemployment, especially in the countries, southern countries of European Union, by promoting this dual system. For example, when I traveled around the world in the last 4 years and before, people mainly asked me about vocational training, about the dual system. What is the hidden success story of this? What is the reason why this works so very well? Well, it's the idea is to bring qualification to the young people in theory and in practice. So you go to school on the one hand, learn economic issues, which you need if you want to start one day your little company, and on the other hand, to show how your work is done in a good way. And then I think this is a qualification which we need. And I'm looking forward for some discussions also in the United States of America, because I heard that there is a similar discussion in many circles in the United States of America about this dual system. And we were very proud to learn that, for example, President Obama, I don't know exactly when it was, I was told, mentioned this dual system. Vocational training is just one aspect, but the headline for this dual system worldwide is more the vocational training wording. That he mentioned it in one of his speeches as an example for successful education for, may I say, for the normal majority of the people, because I mean, going to Harvard is not the majority, even not in Boston.
Yeah, Dr. Westerwelle, you know me. I had the honor, privilege only 2 years ago to accompany you when you visited Azerbaijan on your travel to the South Caucasus, where I was representing at the time Germany as your ambassador. I'm currently doing a sabbatical here in Harvard, and my name is Herbert Quelle for the others in the room, and I'm working on obstacles, impediments to democratization and human rights implementation in Eurasia, which is, or post-Soviet states, which is the area to which Azerbaijan belongs. So I'm especially thrilled with 3 remarks that you made, and which I would like to tie up. First, the self-criticism, if you want, of the Eurocentric view of the world, with which you began, then the figures you gave us about demographic growth in the world, highlighting India, for instance, and then your argument about the Mittelstand. And maybe after this brief comment, you would like to expand a little on your explanation, because I would like to connect them in a way. I do not yet see how this idea of that we need to understand and look at the situation of the world through the eyes of our partners in our attempt to gain new friends and partners, how this connects with the growth figures. Because we're dealing with states, and I would argue that no matter whether China has 2 billion or 100 million, it's still the form of government that we have to understand and with which we have to do our daily deals or our long-term deals. And if you look at the situation in Eurasia, your concept, of which I'm very sympathetic, of promoting Mittelstand, meets a very rigid hurdle, if you want, as that most of these countries do not have much of a culture. They are controlled by patronal regimes, patrimonialismus in Weber's sense, and they are probably an example why modernization theory of Lipset does not work in the end, because although they have had tremendous growth figures and modernized, there are still autocratic regimes and nothing else. So you have to deal with majority of countries which, according to the Freedom House Index, are non-democratic, do not share our values, where it's very difficult to export our Mittelstand as a contribution to democratization, because it just does not exist very much as a concept. So how would you think this can be tied up and connected somewhat? I'm feeling there's a puzzle there. Thank you.
But I didn't say that Mittelstand is the only answer to the challenges, but I think it is one answer. And of course, if you start a new foundation, it does not make sense to work in every detail with a comprehensive approach about everything. I mean, our idea is really to change the situation in some regions, and this is possible. So we are not a think tank, only a think tank which writes intellectual concepts and give policy advice. This is also probably one of the issues of what we do, but our main idea is to support startups, or to finance growth strategies, or to finance dual system education centers, or to give scholarships, or to organize networking between those who already are successful entrepreneurs and those who want to become it. We have small and medium-sized, very small and medium-sized companies in, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm impressed and fascinated about the dynamic of this young generation there. I met young fashion entrepreneurs there, which I never expected in Ghana. I met farmers who asked for the right app to sell their products on the right market. We have an internet scene. No one knows this here. And the question is, when I said here, I mean my home, of course, not here, Cambridge. But I think this is necessary to understand. So I didn't say that this is the only answer, and I don't think that with our foundation can change everything, but this is part of a success story. I personally believe without the Wirtschaftswunder, once again a German word you cannot translate, without the Wirtschaftswunder in the 50s, Germany never ever would have become such a stable and reliable democracy and country in the world, in Europe. It has a lot to do with it. This does not mean that I ignore, for example, the governments. And you know this because you were together with me in Azerbaijan. You remember that everywhere where I was, I always pointed my finger to the human rights situation and to the rule of law. And by the way, rule of law has also something to do with economic improvement. It's not only a political issue, which is more than enough, don't misunderstand me, but it's also a question for investment. or the protection of intellectual property. This is part of the rule of law. It's not only about political rights, individual rights, it's also about the rights if you go into a country. If you want to invest in a country, you want to have your return. And you want to write your own success story. What is the reason why, for example, China is now negotiating with us about intellectual property in a more flexible way than a few years ago? It has a lot to do not only with our rule of law dialogue, which is still successful. It's really a good program. President Xi, when we met him last week on Friday in Berlin, mentioned this program. And our federal President Gauck also did. And I have to say, this is necessary, the rule of law and human rights, but it's also the result of advisement. China, for example, is now more flexible about intellectual property because they have their own research, which they want to protect. So this is, once again, a good sign or a good symbol of a changing world. They do not want to have that their own intellectual property is copied by others. This is something what we have to be aware. So it's complicated. I didn't say that what we do is the answer to everything, but it's a successful answer. This may not change the policy, the human rights policy in some governments, but I think it is a good instrument to create a middle class and a Mittelstand, which then, together with education, ask for our values like democracy, like tolerance, and like the rule of law. I mean, let us be very frank. Do we really think that tolerance is a natural phenomenon? Tolerance is hard to learn. It's hard to learn. And it has something to do with education, including religious tolerance. It's not an easy thing, what I learned. And therefore, that's what we want to do.
Hi, I'm Yasha Monk. I'm a PhD candidate in the government department here and an affiliate of the center. So I agreed with pretty much every word of your opening remarks. But the more I was listening to them, the more you were talking about the world outside of Europe, the more I felt that what I was really learning about is the situation in Europe. Because my feeling is that here at Harvard and the US and a little bit around the world, the message that you were emphasizing has been received long ago. When I look at the students I'm teaching this term, I was meeting with some of them earlier today, and I said, what are your summer plans? One of them is going to Rwanda, one of them is going to Vietnam, one of them is going to Beijing. Not a one said we're going to Europe. You can ask Professor Ziblatt sitting next to you about some of the struggles of his center in procuring and retaining funding.
He's going to Paris next summer.
Well, he's Europeanist, he has to.
I just want to mention it.
Ask him how many
there are
junior
some patriots in this room.
ask him how many junior faculty colleagues he has who study Europe. So I have two questions. So the first is, how can Europe, where clearly, as you're saying, we have trouble at the moment making people look beyond the borders of a nation state to a European level, how can Europe actually start to look beyond the borders of Europe? And what can the role of politics be? Because I'm not sure that, a nice speech here or a foundation there is going to make the difference. So I'm skeptical about the ability of the continent to actually face that future sufficiently. So that's the first question. But the second question from America's point of view, I believe, is that not only is it a question of how important is Europe relative to other countries, and perhaps the Pacific Europe is a little bit more of a trade-off than one would want to believe, but how reliable a partner is Europe going to be? As we all know, some people in the administration have doubts about that, which were expressed in no uncertain terms on tape. And some of those doubts, one might argue, have been vindicated in the sense that Europe has not been willing to stand up very strongly for the Enlightenment values and so on and so forth. So from a Marxist perspective, they're going to say, well, look, it's nice to have a pacifist tradition, it's nice to want to talk to Putin, but in the end, those individual rights and so on you mentioned aren't being protected in Crimea anymore. And so there's a question here about what Germany's role in the long run is between, on the one hand, having this value community with America, which I think is real and which people do believe in, but also strong self-interest of both security and economic kind that leads a whole swath of German public opinion in the direction of soft peddling any criticism of Russia and saying, let's say a couple of words about how we don't love it, but in the end, we're not going to change anything we do in our dealings with Putin.
Well, this was a tough comment. And because I'm not a diplomat any longer, I will answer it, I will return it in the same way, if you allow. Well, first of all, what do you mean with the foundation there and the speech here will not change the world? Wow. Congratulations. I mean, that's true. So, because you provoked it, now you get it. I think this is something that's really such a pessimistic approach to the world. I mean, after this, I should commit suicide. Speech here, foundation there will not change the world. Yes, that's true. But it is necessary to do what we can. Sure. So we agree. It's necessary to do what we can. And this means someone has to start. And we can only do what is the result of our capabilities and of our wishes and our experience. And therefore, I think it will change the world. Not one speech, and not one foundation, and not one politician or one man or one woman, but together, I think we can change many things in the world. And probably I'm so impressed when I look back to what was possible and what is still possible after the revolutions in the Arab world, that I believe in the power of ideas and of the freedom of speech, and I think it can change more than we all believe. This does not mean that we can exclude setbacks. That's true, but I think we can change. This was my first remark, and forgive me being so frank and so clear, but you're smiling, so you accept this. So the second thing what I wanted to say is about Europe. I agree to what you said, not in all consequences, of course, when you said no one is going to Europe. I can tell you, Berlin at the moment is a place to be for the young people. Really. When do you go next time to Berlin?
Me?
You?
No imminent plans, but sooner or later.
Better sooner than later. So, and I mean, ask the young people. I think it has a lot to do with reality. What I'm telling. Europe is still, and especially Berlin at the moment, is really attraction for the young people, or attracts young people, and this is one of our advantages, which we should use at the moment. But what you said about Europe is exactly what concerns me. Not in these consequences which you pointed out to make it clear, but this is exactly the same what I'm afraid about. What I'm concerned. This is that Europe becomes the cliché of the old continent. That Europe could become a museum where you love to go to see Versailles or other wonderful sites, but not where you can conquer the future. And this is exactly one of the most important topics on our agenda. We are living in a defining moment for Europe, in minimum two aspects. At the moment, we have the defining moment in Europe. How will the people in the European Union think about Europe and the European institutions? And we get an answer in May. And the second defining moment is, how will the world understand and think about Europe, overcoming the debt crisis? Are we able to draw the consequences out of this crisis? Are we able to renovate our political structures in the European Union? Are we able to bring young people not only as visitors to Europe, but also as investors, as young entrepreneurs who would like to drive their own startup? And this is, I think, the main question, what we have to answer. So this is the core of your remark. I can only agree. It's really something which concerns me, not the wording you use about Europe, because I'm really a European patriot. But the core, I think, of your concern is something I share, unfortunately. That's exactly what I think. What is the answer? The answer, for example, is that European leaders should stay on the reform track. Because if we give up the reforms after such a crisis, this is the first step into the next crisis. That's my personal concern. And I'm not sure if we are able in Europe at the moment to overcome the upcoming political crisis in Europe in the sense of bringing the reforms through the institutions, the democratic institutions. That's why, for example, I admire the Spanish government. It's one of the reasons why I really admire the Spanish government. I mean, can you imagine what it means for a government handling and facing all these protesters on the street, and every young man, every young woman who's on the streets protesting at the moment? I really can understand, and they have my personal sympathy and also our solidarity, no doubt about it. But I think it's really impressive that the leaders in Spain that they insist of implementing the reforms. It is a bit similar to what we had with the Agenda 2010 in my country, former Chancellor Schröder. He was more or less forced by the economic situation in Germany to start this reform program, because when he started this Agenda 2010, it was not on a voluntary base. He was forced to do so because Germany was the sick man of Europe. Just remember the front page of The Economist. We were the sick man of Europe. And then we started the reforms, very successful, and I hope that this reform track will not stop too early. Then I think what you mentioned, which I really share in your concern, is something what will really bring up new questions, and then we can really enter the next crisis with more turbulences than we had. And on the other hand, I mean, just look to Spain, look to Greece, look to Portugal, especially Ireland. I mean, no one can ignore that they did their homework. Not enough in every country, but progress is there, and there are tangible results.
Great. So we have like 15 more minutes and a lot of questions, but I think you just had your hand. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Helge Brockmann. I'm a visiting scholar. I'm German. And my question goes to this competitive advantage that Europe could have, because if you point to demographic change, then Europe is really an aging continent, and it will shrink. So should it, on the international level, then give up power? Because on the global scale, we're becoming less and less important and numerous. And wouldn't it be not fair to give each person on the global scale the same kind of power, and therefore power must shift to Asia and Africa? The other thing is on the within country or within continent level, should we start to immediately severe redistribution between generations? Because what we see is that actually the young are particularly suffering in Europe from all these crises and all these reforms? And should we then not, start a new policy that really focuses only on the young and not on the old, what we usually do when the current government does this as well?
No, please forgive me that I will not make any remarks to the current government. I'm out of politics now, and I do not want to make comments to my successor or to my successors. But about the first question, I would like to answer it in that way. What can we do? I mean, the demographic development is for sure. We
can open borders as well. We could let in
for example, this is, for example, one answer I would like to give you. I think it starts with the visa regime in Germany and in Europe. I think that's a visa regime from yesterday. I have to say this, in Germany and in Europe. And I started many initiatives, and some were successful in the last 5 years, to implement a more flexible, more liberal visa regime, which is necessary not only for the business, which is especially necessary, for example, to bring in young people from other countries, maybe not from the United States, they don't have this problem, but from other countries. I had a meeting of some years ago as foreign minister in India. I visited a Goethe Institute with pupils, and they visited kind of German school there and wanted to learn the German language. And they were 15, 16 years old, very young, wonderful young people. And they asked me the question, sitting there as foreign minister, not knowing that I cannot do everything, even being member of a government, and cannot change everything, sitting there. And they asked me the question, I will never forget this, said, in German, and please allow me to say this in German, because it was so wonderful. It was of course not easy to understand, because they just started to learn it. 15, 16 years old. Wirklich zauberhafte junge Menschen. Und dann sagte er, ich will es auf Deutsch extra sagen, sagte ein junges Mädchen, ich lerne Deutsch, wann darf ich nach Deutschland, um das auch mal zu probieren? I'm learning German, when can I come to Germany to practice it? What do you answer? So, from my point of view, yes, you're absolutely right. And the second answer I would like to give you, so this is once again, we agree in this point, absolutely. But the second point is, we will not change the whole demographic shift in the world. That's impossible. Even if we would even we would have the most flexible visa regime, we will not bring the answer into this dimension. But what we have to do is to find new strategic partnerships. Strategic partnerships. This is the answer. New strategic partnerships. And this was on the agenda in my last 4 years, that we started new strategic partnerships with new countries. Not only with the BRICS, but also with other countries, next line of emerging countries we do not have on the radar screen. Vietnam, for example, or just look to Indonesia. Indonesia is a regional power, underestimated in our public discussions, completely underestimated. It's really a regional power. They all have their problems, no doubt about it. Or Turkey. No one is convinced that what's going on in Turkey is that way, is a proper development, no doubt about it, what we saw there. But please understand that we have such an emerging country, emerging nation, in our neighborhood as Europeans. This is partly Europe, and we have to understand what's going on there. Indonesia or go to Latin America, for example. Everyone knows Brazil, Mexico, and probably also Argentina, because they are in G20. And this means they have some economic weight. But what is with countries like, for example, Colombia? Colombia, look into it. It's not all these old cliches we have and see in some movies about drugs and crime. This is also a threat, no doubt about it. But when I was there, for example, in such a country, in Colombia, I had a meeting with German business people, with the German business community, and I was really surprised to learn what kind of products they create or produce in this little companies there. High qualified products. I remember the visit of a technical medical plant or a little company there. And I was absolutely impressed what's going on there. So the idea is the early bird will catch the worm. So let us be the early bird by creating new strategic partnerships early enough, because the friends you find in your youth is the most reliable and sustainable friendship you can get. And they are now looking to us. Do we only go there, invest, take some profit, and leave the country, or do we go there and stay and organize a transfer of knowledge, for example? Do we really assist them by their own economic development?
But do we also invite them to Europe?
Excellent question.
I mean, that is
Excellent question. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more about what you said. I think this is one of the obstacles we have to overcome. I couldn't agree more to what you said. But there's only one answer to this. I think the second important answer is find and create now strategic partnerships early enough. It's always the same. These emerging countries, they are just creating their self-confidence. They know that they have potential and that they have really possibilities, but they are not self-assured enough at the moment. And now is the time, with good investments, to go there and to build economic centers, houses, representations of our business community. The main reason, personally, it's a bit, I'm sorry, a bit too long, but let me answer it, because this is really, for me, it's really the key question, what we can ask. How can we manage this new challenges in the world? For me, I think it is decisive. It's crucial that we go there early enough, and that we try to invest there early enough with a long-term perspective. This is our advantage as Germans and as Western democracies. This is something they will not forget, I think, if we do it early enough.
So I think what I want to do, because we're running out of time, is collect a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was a bit too long, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, not at all. So yes.
Hi, my name is Robert Helbig. I'm a student at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and I'm also a big fan of Berlin. So thank you for mentioning that. My question relates to your notion to engage strategic partners, new rising countries on the world stage. And one comment you made in your opening remarks was to opening international governance reform, to give them a higher voice in the UN Security Council, for example. So I'm just wondering, in terms of foreign policy and Germany's interest and the interest of the Transatlantic Alliance, if it actually makes sense to give the BRICS larger voice, because they've constantly allied and balanced against the West, usually on the notion of protecting sovereignty, but also this time in relation to Russia's annexation of Crimea. And then the second part of my question is, what can we actually do to engage them, and what's Germany's role beyond these economic relations that you've touched on?
So, and before I answer that, maybe if I could just ask, get one more question, yes.
You can give me a yes or no answer actually to this. Recently, Sir Michael Lee, who served as a former Director General to the European Commission until 2 years ago, in a very bold piece argued that the European Union was guilty of placing Ukraine in a choice situation between the EU and Russia, and that should have been avoided. Now, you were privy to the talks about the agreements of association with Ukraine. Do you share that guilty verdict or not? I mean, do you agree with the guilty verdict or not?
No, but I never answer questions with yes or no. Why should I?
That's good enough as an answer.
Neither the same question.
No. Why should I? First about the BRICS. I mean, this is also a delicate question because let me provoke you a bit. This means we only give other people's new rights if they act in the way we like. Which means the BRICS can have more influence in the international politics if they do what we want. I don't think it was provocative what I answered, but this is the salt and the pepper in this discussion to answer that way. And the second thing I would like to mention is probably in this year we get new discussions, do the BRICS really still exist? As a coordinated format. Or are there more the BRICS on the one side and China with a unique position? Interesting question.
Or the BRICS without Russia.
Or the BRICS. We never know. But I mean, especially the unique and very special role of China. It's interesting. I do not have the answer yet. I just say that probably we'll get this discussion this year. What is the future of the BRICS? Do the BRICS still exist like we saw them in the last years? Also as a strategic alliance in the General Assembly, for example, or in international issues. Remember the coordination, or remember the initiatives President Lula started in the Middle East, not successful. But I think this showed us a lot, that the Brazilian president suddenly tried to mediate or tried to influence the policy in this Middle East issue, which is not natural. Or just remember the special role the BRICS countries played in respect to Iran. I think that's interesting when we discuss the sanctions, for example, in the last years. So the main question is what is with BRICS and what is with China? And will they have their unique and their very special position in this group? This group will still try to engage and try to consider everything. But I think this is an interesting question. But I mean, the fact that we get sometimes answers by these countries, like by Brazil or by India or by China, or also by South Africa, does not mean we do not like. Does not mean that we can ignore their rights of better representation in the international institutions. I think this will not work. We have to understand. I mentioned at the beginning this surveillance scandal, which is really a mega issue in Germany, and not only in Germany. And for example, it's interesting to see that the initiative I started in the last year as foreign minister in the General Assembly was co-sponsored by Brazil. And the first signature, important signature we got with this initiative was the signature by Indonesia about privacy and about the individual rights and the rule of law. It's interesting to see this. So we have to understand this is something probably not everyone liked in Washington, but it was necessary. And this is what I mean. We have to see how this will develop. About Ukraine, I wouldn't agree to such a position, because we built bridges, especially in the last 2 years, that Ukraine does not have to decide between West or East. For example, we accepted the observer status in the custom union. President Yanukovych, I had many meetings with him, and I personally was convinced after our last 2-hour meetings we had in fall this year, before the Vilnius summit, that they want to sign the EU association agreement, and that one of the obstacles decide between West or East we could overcome by this construction of an observer status in the customs union. This was one example. So I think there were different reasons for this latest development. That President Yanukovych didn't sign the EU association agreement had less to do with the context or with some things we thought it is necessary. It had more to do with the economic situation and the promises he got. And I mean, just let me say it as an advocatus diaboli, and please, if someone is writing about this, please put this in brackets, because it can be misunderstood. And I just want to make this clear. I mean, it is not easy for someone living in Ukraine, belonging to a poor family, to learn that the Western world insists to increase the energy prices, and Moscow promises to double the pensions. We have to think about this, I think. That's not a political question. I think I was among those in Europe who said it can't be the question of some billions, from my point of view, because it's a historical issue. And I'm very sad that it happened that way. Very sad about this.
So we're really almost out of time, so I think we'll just take one last round of questions, and then I think we'll have to end it there. So just
I'm totally relaxed. Okay. It's the first time in my life since 30 years that I have time. So
James Royal.
From my point of view, we can stay the whole night. And
an interested neighbor. Most of your discussion has dealt with things beyond the border of the European Union, but it strikes me that immediately to your east you have an economy, the success of which has a lot to do with the development of a Polish Mittelstand. And in southeastern Europe, if you go to Bucharest, we have a country with a lot of problems with governance and its judiciary, but in a meeting like this at ASEA, or for example, you would find a room filled with frustrated entrepreneurs, people who would like to be managers of their own businesses and entrepreneurs. How would you leverage the experience, the unfinished project of European integration in your foundation and in your message to the rest of the world? So let's starting internally.
Yeah, let's just get one more question.
Internally.
One more question.
Within Europe
Within
and
Europe.
in German political
Yeah.
reference points.
And this will then have
Oh,
to be.
this is an issue for the next evening. I think.
I'm available.
Right. Hi, I'm Jan Voxtigel. I'm a junior at the college. I wanted to know something about your time during the Arab Spring. It seems like personally you're very passionate about the region. And I mean, there's like this arc in time from you being on Tahrir Square in 2011 to you talking to President, or not President, maybe President Sisi last year when you visited Cairo for the last time as in office. So I just wanted to know, like, in hindsight now, from your perspective, what expectations that you had in the beginning and what decisions that were taking, for example, in the case of Libya, proved to be rather wrong or misjudged. Yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Well, let me start with your question, if you allow, and then I come back to your remarks and to your question about the Arab seasons and the revolutions in the Arab world. And you mentioned Libya. I think we have to learn two lessons after 9th of 11. That we have to correct two developments. The first is that in the name of security, we think a limitation of freedom, or that security can justify nearly every limitation of freedom. I don't believe in this. This is the result, for example, what I just said with the surveillance. Individual rights are absolutely fundamental for all of us, including privacy. This does not mean that I am naive. I know that we need intelligence, but I think the relation between security and freedom disbalanced in the last 10, 12 years. This is the first, and we will look back one day and we will see that this, I'm glad that democracy is a learning system, that this will be corrected from the society. The society will ask for the new policy about this, not only in Europe. The second development, which we will discuss in a different way in a few years, is the military interventionism. And if we look back to the interventionism in the last 10, 12 years, you may ask yourself the question, where was it successful? Just think about it. I only know one example, and this has a lot to do with the European perspective. Balkans, Kosovo. I heard it, what you said. Exactly what you said. But the agreement, Cathy Ashton, William Hague, and myself, we could promote between Serbia and Kosovo was part of a political solution. And we could offer a European perspective. And the fact that Europe proved that we made it serious with the European perspectives for the Balkan countries by integrating Croatia in a crisis as a 28th member in the European Union was really a historical decision from my point of view. But if you look around to the international armed conflicts to the world, I just would like to ask yourself, what has happened? What did it cost in every sense of the word? What did it bring? And I think then you understand that I'm absolutely clear with every decision in this context. I do not regret one single word about my policy of diplomatic and political solutions. Not one single word. I had to resist many attacks, especially from the medias. There was the right-wing medias. They said this is the responsibility to protect. But regime change was not the responsibility to protect. And what is with the responsibility after protection? And then there were the right the other part of the political critics we got. There it was, how could you not go along with our very best friends? Because I was not convinced that military interventionism is a policy which can prevent and really can help to come out of new crisis. And I only ask you to look into the situation in Iraq or in Libya. Nothing else. And then we may discuss this in a few years in a different light, from my personal point of view. This is what I want to say about what you mentioned. So I'm absolutely clear with what we had to decide then in those days. The second thing is, and I'm glad that I always had the support of 2/3 of the majority of my people. You know, I'm very glad and grateful for this. The second thing is about Europe and the integration. Well, this is extremely complicated, and you know this, of course, because let me answer it in an unexpected way. We had a discussion between North and South and between Berlin and other capitals in the last years about the so-called austerity policy, austerity. For those of you who speak German as in their native language, you know that the word austerity does not exist in our German language. We don't have this. Austerity, Austerität. Austerität is not a used word in Germany. It is an artificial word, what we have. So we do not have this word austerity. And what we use is the word fiscal discipline. And discipline has very positive vibrations in German ears. It's completely different. It's sometimes I think it was the word which brought us so many problems in Europe. It's the same with other words. For example, I mean, I'm a liberal, but I assure you, not in the sense like this word is used in the United States of America. Absolutely not. More as a center politician. That's my self-understanding. And austerity was very similar to this. Austerity doesn't exist. So what we want to do is, for better integration, that we follow 3 principles. Fiscal discipline, because you cannot solve a debt crisis by making it easier to take up new debts. Second is solidarity. And Germany shows enormous solidarity in Europe. If you just compare the economy of the United States of America with the economy of Germany, the size, people, the economy. It would be similar that that the president would ask the Congress to give him $1 trillion US to help neighbor states. That's the size of what we are talking. Relatively spoken to the size, to the dimension of our economy, of course. So solidarity is the second thing, which is absolutely necessary, no doubt about it. And the third answer is because Europe always grew and improved and integrated more as a result of a crisis. So the third answer is what we have to give is reforms. And it's a complete misunderstanding to believe that this is reduced only to economic reforms. I started this initiative, so-called the Rule of Law Initiative, in 2012, together with some colleagues, and we got a 2/3 majority in the European Foreign Council as foreign ministers there. And now you saw this probably the Commission before the elections, which was very important for us, published their first ideas about it, because it is necessary. I mean, what is Europe? Europe is also a community of values. Europe is more than a single market and a common currency. It's freedom. It is rule of law, individual rights. It's not cherry picking. It is, and it's more than our peaceful answer once again to the darkest chapter in our history. It is our answer in times of high-speed globalization, what I said earlier. And I think if we want to be successful in the eyes of our normal people, it is necessary to understand rule of law, democratic rights, is not less important than economic structural reforms. And I do not want to mention the countries for reasons of politeness, which I mean. But it's may I say, indispensable that we stay on this track. The Rule of Law Initiative is not less important than all our initiatives for fiscal discipline, reform and budget control and so on and so on. I think this is my answer to the question, how can we integrate Europe and how can we better our European structures. So thank you so much for your time. It was very, very nice to meet you, and I wish you all the best, and I hope